The invisible death. What happens when the system forgets you're human? Welcome to Soft Girl Era, the sacred space where strong Black women unlearn survival, rediscover softness, and reclaim the joy, rest, and freedom they deserve. I'm your host, LeAnne Dolce, pronounced Dolce like sweet softness whispered in French. And I'm your guide from burnout to boundaries, from doing to being, from strong to soft and loving every second of it. Today's conversation is different. Today, we're not talking about setting boundaries at work or learning to say no to your cousin's drama. Today, we're talking about what happens when the people who are supposed to protect us forget we're human. Today, we're talking about Kristian Antoine and the mother who refuses to let his name be buried in silence. I had the privilege of interviewing Antionette Antoine, a Black mother whose son Kristian died alone in a cell at the Joe Corley Detention Center in Texas. Antionette is not just a grieving mother. She is a warrior for justice, a voice for the voiceless, and a force demanding that incarcerated people, especially Black people, especially people with chronic illnesses like diabetes, be treated like the human beings they are. She is making the world better by refusing to be quiet, by demanding accountability, and by standing in the gap for every other family who has been handed a body and a story that doesn't add up. Her fight is not just for Christian, it's for every person sitting in a cell right now wondering if anyone will check on them. It's for every mother waiting by the phone, praying her child is safe. So let's talk about what happened to Christian. Let's talk about what's still happening at Joe Corley. And let's talk about what we as a community can do to make sure no other mother has to bury her child under these circumstances. Kristian Antoine was diabetic. That's not a secret. That's not something the facility didn't know. Diabetes is a condition that requires consistent monitoring, regular meals, access to water, and medical attention when things go wrong. It's not optional, it's life or death. And yet, Christian was left in his cell unnoticed for 24 hours. Officers were supposed to check on him every hour. That's the policy. That's what's written down somewhere in a manual that probably sits on a shelf collecting dust. But policy on paper means absolutely nothing if no one is held accountable when it's ignored. And let's be honest, policies are often just pretty words designed to protect institutions, not people. When Antionette finally got the call 5 days after her son's death, she was told conflicting stories about how he was found. 5 days. Let that sink in for a moment. Imagine waiting 5 days to find out your child is gone. Imagine being told different versions of the same tragedy as if the truth doesn't matter because he was behind bars, as if his life, his dignity, his mother's grief are all negotiable, as if Black lives, incarcerated lives, diabetic lives are somehow less worthy of honesty, of care, of basic human decency. This is not a mistake. This is not an unfortunate accident. This is systemic neglect. This is what happens when facilities like Joe Corley operate without real oversight, without consequences, without the kind of public pressure that forces people in power to remember that incarcerated people are still people. They are still somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's whole world. And here's the thing, Christian is not the only one. Let me tell you about Roger. Human Rights Watch documented his story. Roger was an immigrant detainee who was transferred to Joe Corley, and his health immediately declined. His family begged for information. They begged for medical attention. They were met with silence. One family member said, "That's when things get bad," describing the moment Roger arrived at Joe Corley. His loved ones were powerless to intervene as his condition worsened, trapped behind communication barriers and a system that treats transparency like a favor, not a right. Roger's story is part of a broader human rights record showing that detainees at Joe Corley and similar facilities face dangerous lapses in medical care and monitoring. It's not isolated, it's a pattern. And Christian's death fits right into that pattern. When advocates tried to shine a light on what was happening inside Joe Corley, they were met with bureaucratic walls, delayed responses, and a culture that protects the institution over the individual. Human Rights Watch used Roger's story to push for investigations into detention health practices and to argue for stricter oversight of privately run or contracted federal facilities like Joe Corley. But pushing for change and actually getting change are two very different things. And while advocates push, people like Roger and Kristian continue to suffer and die. Let's go back further. Let's talk about Sandra Bland. In 2015, Sandra, a 28-year-old Black woman, was found dead in her jail cell in Waller County, Texas, 3 days after a traffic stop and arrest. Investigations revealed that required visual checks of inmates were not consistently performed. Her family questioned the circumstances, citing gaps, inconsistencies, and a pattern of neglect. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit, and public pressure led to the Sandra Bland Act in Texas, aimed at improving mental health services and requiring better data and training for law enforcement. Sandra had recently moved to Texas for a job at her alma mater. She was excited about her future. She was stopped for a traffic infraction, arrested after a confrontational encounter, and taken to Waller County Jail. In the days that followed, there were warning signs about her mental state that were not adequately addressed under existing jail policies and monitoring procedures. Her death sparked national outrage, and her family's persistence turned a personal tragedy into a statewide policy conversation, resulting in tangible legal reforms and national awareness of deaths in custody. Sandra's story taught us that when jails fail to conduct proper checks or respond to clear risks, people in custody, often Black people, die needlessly, and families are left to fight for answers. Sound familiar? Because it should. Christian's story is Sandra's story. Roger's story is Christian's story. This is not new. This is Texas. This is America. This is what happens when we treat incarceration as punishment instead of accountability, when we forget that people behind bars are still somebody's child, still somebody's loved one, still somebody's whole world. The Houston Chronicle conducted an in depth investigation into Texas prison health care and found that medical providers in state facilities are among the best paid public employees. Yet, incarcerated people and their families report serious delays, neglect, and preventable deaths. At several audited Texas facilities, auditors found serious problems in health services, including failures in timely treatment and oversight. Families reported that chronic conditions like diabetes, heart disease, and mental illness were not properly managed, sometimes ending in severe injury or death. Complaints and grievances often went unanswered, leaving families with little recourse and no clear path to accountability. The investigation showed that money and policies alone do not guarantee humane care. Without accountability and enforcement, incarcerated people remain at risk. Chronic illnesses like diabetes, like Christian's, require consistent monitoring. When systems fail, the consequences are fatal. Texas relies heavily on contracted medical providers and large public institutions to deliver care inside prisons and certain detention facilities. Despite generous compensation for some providers, audits still found gaps in staffing, record keeping, and response times, suggesting systemic problems in how incarcerated people are treated. The Chronicle's work brought hidden stories of neglect to public attention, adding data and documentation to what families had been saying for years. So let's be clear about what we're talking about here. We're talking about facilities that are paid to care for people, that have policies in place to protect people, and that still allow people to die alone, unnoticed, unchecked. We're talking about a system that waits 5 days to notify a mother that her son is dead. We're talking about a system that gives conflicting stories because the truth is inconvenient. We're talking about a system that treats Black lives, incarcerated lives, diabetic lives as disposable. And Antionette is saying, not my son, not without a fight, not without answers, not without accountability. Here's what I want you to remember from this conversation: three things. Write them down, tattoo them on your heart, share them with everyone you know. First, incarcerated people are human beings who deserve basic care and dignity. Kristian's death shows what happens when a facility forgets that people behind bars still have the right to be checked on, to receive medical care, food, water, and clean clothes, especially when they are living with serious conditions like diabetes. This is not radical. This is the bare minimum. And yet, it's being denied. Every single day, people are sitting in cells across this country, hoping someone will remember they exist, hoping someone will bring them their medication, hoping someone will check to see if they're still breathing. That should never be a hope. That should be a guarantee. Second, negligence and lack of accountability in facilities like Joe Corley cost lives and leave Black families without answers. Officers were supposed to check on Kristian every hour, yet he went unnoticed for a whole day, and the facility waited 5 days to notify his family while providing conflicting stories about how he was found. That is not a mistake. That is a systemic failure that demands investigation, legal action, and public scrutiny. When we allow institutions to operate in the shadows, when we allow them to write their own reports and investigate themselves, we are complicit in the harm they cause. Accountability is not optional, it is essential. Third, collective pressure. Sharing, speaking out, supporting legal action can move the system towards justice. Kristian is not the only one. Other families have lost loved ones in the same facility and have been met with silence. When our community shares these stories, supports legal efforts, and refuses to look away, we increase the chance of accountability for Joe Corley and protection for other incarcerated people. We have seen it work before. Sandra Bland's family did not give up, and their fight led to real change. Roger's story, documented by Human Rights Watch, added to the growing body of evidence that these facilities are failing. And now Antionette is adding her voice, her son's name, her family's pain to that chorus. And we need to amplify it. This is not just about Kristian. This is about every person sitting in a cell right now, wondering if anyone will check on them. This is about every mother waiting by the phone, praying her child is safe. This is about whether we, as a society, believe that people behind bars are still people. Antionette Antoine believes it. She's fighting for it, and she needs us to believe it too. So here's what I'm asking you to do. And I'm not asking politely, I'm demanding, I'm begging, I'm pleading. Share Kristian's story widely. Post about it on every platform you have. Talk about it at dinner tables, in group chats, in boardrooms, in churches. Refuse to let it be buried in silence. Silence is what allows these systems to keep operating unchecked. Silence is what kills people like Kristian. Support the families' fight for justice. Signal boost their search for attorneys experienced in civil rights and wrongful death cases involving jails and detention centers. If you can, donate to help cover legal and investigative costs via the GoFundMe link the family has provided. Every single dollar is a brick in the wall of accountability. Every share is a megaphone for truth. Hold local systems accountable. Call and email elected officials, sheriffs, and oversight bodies in Texas. Demand independent investigation into deaths at Joe Corley. Demand stronger protections for people with medical conditions like diabetes in custody. Do not accept generic responses or empty promises. Demand action, demand transparency, demand change. Stand with other affected families. If you have loved ones in custody, document everything, request records, connect with advocacy groups so no one has to fight alone. There is power in numbers. There is power in collective action. There is power in refusing to accept the unacceptable. This is about more than one family. This is about all of us. This is about the kind of world we want to live in. Do we want to live in a world where people can die alone, unnoticed, unchecked, and their families are given conflicting stories 5 days later? Or do we want to live in a world where every person, regardless of where they are, regardless of what they've done, is treated with basic human dignity? I know which world I want, and I know Antionette knows which world she's fighting for. The question is, which world are you willing to fight for? Kristian mattered, Roger mattered, Sandra mattered, and every person sitting in a cell right now waiting for someone to check on them matters. So do not look away. Do not scroll past. Do not tell yourself this is someone else's problem. This is our problem. This is our responsibility. This is our moment to decide whether we will be silent or whether we will roar. Antionette is roaring, and she's asking us to roar with her. Will you?